While the world was watching Donald Trump navigate and diffuse the immediate Iran-Israel crisis earlier this week, Britain once again demonstrated that it is the driving force behind perpetual war and destabilization, and Donald Trump is directly challenging that. The established narrative tells you that it is the American empire that instigates global conflicts, that NATO follows our lead, and that the British Empire is a thing of the past. Well, Ukrainian President Zelensky's second unprecedented meeting with King Charles this year and the new defense agreements between Ukraine and Britain tell another story, namely that Britain is continuing to try to ensnare the U.S. in their forever wars, and Trump has called them out in the most direct way. This is Susan Kokinda, and for decades, my colleagues and I have pointed to the British hand behind the disastrous policies too often adopted by the United States and other countries. But what is happening right now is the clearest example yet of how the British Empire still operates. In this update, I'm going to look at three major developments: how Trump de-escalated the Iran-Israel crisis through direct intervention and by ignoring the establishment's rulebook; Britain's shocking war escalation with Ukraine while Trump is trying to stop the killing; and why Trump's comments about NATO and Article 5 are a direct threat to the entire post-war globalist world order. So, throughout the unfolding of the latest Iran-Israel crisis, our updates have stressed that Donald Trump's agenda has nothing to do with the screaming headlines of the blogosphere, which have trumpeted in capital letters that he had capitulated to Netanyahu, the neocons, and the regime changers. Trump made pretty clear yesterday that that is not the case, starting with his now famous comments when he responded to the exchange of missiles between Iran and Israel after the ceasefire had been negotiated. And when he said, "We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the F they're doing. Do you understand that?" Not exactly standard presidential diplomacy. But it got even more interesting as Trump drilled down on the fact that Israel was the biggest problem. He said, "Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them." And then Trump released this post on Truth. "Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it is a major violation. Bring your pilots home now." And not long after that, Trump announced on Air Force One that Israel had turned its planes back and confirmed that he had spoken directly to Netanyahu to deliver the message. But Trump's remarks on Air Force One got more and more interesting. After slapping down Israel, Trump addressed the neocon drumbeat for regime change. And when he was asked if he wants regime change in Iran, he said, "No, I don't want. I'd like to see everything calm down as quickly as possible. Regime change takes chaos, and ideally we don't want to see so much chaos, so we'll see how it does." You know, the Iranians are very good traders, very good business people, and they got a lot of oil. They should be fine. They should be able to rebuild and do a good job. No wonder Jack Posobiec asked if anyone had done a welfare check on Lindsey Graham or Mark Levin. And especially, again, after Trump's comments today, right before he left the NATO summit, where he was asked about China and Iran, and he said he doesn't have a problem with China continuing to buy Iranian oil and dismiss the idea of stricter sanctions on Iran. This is classic Trump. He's offering Iran a path to prosperity through trade instead of nuclear weapons. And as we saw in his first term and with his earlier visit to Saudi Arabia this year, he is not using the British geopolitical manual for the Mideast, which is to move pieces around on a chessboard to keep the region in permanent turmoil so a financier elite can maintain their control over energy and economies. This is Trump's economic statecraft based on sovereignty, not military escalation. But while Trump is trying to end wars, Great Britain is trying to perpetuate them. While Trump was on his way to the NATO summit, Ukrainian puppet President Zelensky was in London for a very special set of meetings, and not just with Prime Minister Starmer, but with King Charles himself at Windsor Castle. And as was pointed out when Zelensky met with King Charles earlier this year, it is highly unusual for the king to publicly involve himself in foreign policy. So this wasn't a courtesy call. This was a signal and a war planning session at the highest levels of the British establishment. It's not a coincidence that yesterday Zelensky was given a hero's welcome at Chatham House, the British foreign policy establishment's nerve center, and the place where Henry Kissinger admitted in 1982 that, quote, "In my White House incarnation then, I kept the British Foreign Office better informed and more closely engaged than I did the American State Department." As you can see, this pattern of British manipulation isn't new, and we've been on it for decades. If you want to understand how deep this goes and get the real analysis behind these geopolitical moves and Trump's counter moves, make sure you've subscribed to our channel and to our newsletter. So, following in Kissinger's footsteps, Zelensky said, "When I'm in London or anywhere in the United Kingdom, for me it's very important because your people helped us. They helped Ukraine at the very beginning of this war." And then he dropped the real bombshell. He announced that Ukraine and Britain will co-produce new long-distance drones. British Prime Minister Starmer's office put out an official statement that the two countries will now share battlefield technology with, quote, "data sets from Ukraine's front line set to be plugged into UK production lines, allowing British defense firms to rapidly design and build at scale cutting-edge military equipment available nowhere else in the world." And guess who those drones will be deployed against? Now think about what this means. While Trump is trying to wind down conflicts and prevent new wars, Britain is literally setting up weapons manufacturing with Ukraine to escalate and prolong the war. This is the British Empire playbook, and they've been using it for centuries. Keep the world in turmoil and chaos in order to maintain their global influence. Their elites are orchestrating these policies for the benefit of the empire. And they don't care about the British people, and they don't care that they are suffering or that their nation is collapsing, because this isn't about nations. They're not our allies. They've been our handlers, and they're terrified that Trump sees right through their game. The British understand something that most Americans don't. By setting up joint drone manufacturing with Ukraine, they're ensuring this conflict continues indefinitely, regardless of what any American president wants. And that brings us to Trump's significant move this week, his comments about NATO's Article 5. This is where Trump directly challenged the post-war system, which is premised on an eternal conflict between the United States and Russia. As I discuss Trump's Article 5 bombshell, I want you to remember what Trump said last week at the G7 summit, that it had been a mistake to throw Russia out of the G7 in 2014. So what did Trump say about Article 5 on Air Force One? He questioned the fundamental premise of Article 5 mutual defense, the clause that commits America to go to war for any NATO member. When he was asked directly if he's still committed to Article 5, Trump gave an answer that sent shockwaves through the establishment. He said, "Depends on your definition. There's numerous definitions of Article 5. You know that, right?" This put the British into a frenzy. The Financial Times had a headline, which has now been taken down, which said, "Trump's Article 5 NATO announcement puts summit at risk." The British and the Atlantic elite are now trying to calm themselves down because Trump later, when he was asked about his commitment to Article 5 after arriving at The Hague, said, "We are with them all the way." And in the press conference which he just gave before leaving NATO, when again asked about Article 5, he spoke in generalities, saying, "Well, without the United States, you can't have NATO. It wouldn't work. It might in the future." And the main focus of Trump's remarks continued to be that other NATO countries have to pay for their own defense. Or maybe to put it another way, they're going to have to finance their own wars. And again, as he said on Air Force One, his first priority is to saving lives. "I'm committed to life and safety." Now, think about this. Who has Trump been talking to try to resolve conflicts? Since May 19th, he's talked to Russian President Putin 3 times, starting with a 2-hour call. And in his most recent call, Putin offered to help with Iran. And Trump said, Vladimir called me up. He said, "Can I help you with Iran?" I said, "No, I don't need help with Iran. I need help with you. I hope we're going to be getting a deal done with Russia." Now contrast those 3 calls to the one confirmed call to Bibi Netanyahu in the same period. And that call was yesterday, when Trump told Israel to call off the airstrikes on Iran. Trump's commitment is not to an outdated geopolitical construct, whether it's unconditional support for wars with Russia or unconditional support of Bibi Netanyahu. It's to stop the killing while never sacrificing American security. And this isn't about abandoning allies. This is about ending the British strategy of using NATO to prevent American-Russian cooperation. Trump understands what the establishment fears most. Direct dialogue between the world's nuclear superpowers will bypass imperial control. And not just with Russia, but also with China and India. But since the fall of the Soviet Union, the British and their neocon partners have spent decades using NATO to ensure that America and Russia remain enemies, because Russian-American cooperation would cut the puppet master's strings. Trump is signaling that he's ready to break that cycle, even if it means redefining America's NATO commitments. But here's what makes this week truly historic. Trump isn't just questioning individual policies. He's dismantling the entire post-war system, which undercuts true sovereignty. And instead, that post-war system has made every nation dependent on globalist financial and military institutions. So here's what we're really looking at. He's breaking the chains that have bound America to the British imperial system for over a century. Those chains are economic and strategic. While in this update we aren't touching on the American economic revolution, which Trump is fighting to carry out, our other videos and our website have plenty to say about that. But here we're focused on Trump's foreign policy. The Iran-Israel intervention shows he can solve problems everyone else says are impossible by offering economic partnership instead of endless military confrontation. The British war games with Zelensky expose who's really driving these endless conflicts, not American interests, but British imperial ambitions. And his NATO comments signal that America is done being Europe's military enforcer and financial piggy bank. This week proved that Trump understands the real enemy isn't Iran, Russia, or China. It's the imperial system that uses American power to maintain global control. That's why they're fighting him so hard. Because if Trump succeeds, it doesn't just mean America first. It means the end of empire itself. The question now is whether the American people will understand what's at stake and support Trump in his historic mission to restore true sovereignty to our republic and to the world. We are rapidly driving toward our immediate goal of 1,000 paying members here at Promethean Action. And many of those who have already joined us are asking for more background on what we mean by the modern-day British Empire. The more support we get, the more we'll be able to deliver on providing that vital history and analysis. The fight for American sovereignty depends on Americans who understand the real enemy, and that starts with you. So please subscribe, contribute, and join the fight. This has been your Midweek Update. Thanks for watching.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.